Okay, am I set? Can people hear me and see my screen? Okay, great. So my name is David Williamson. As Sanjay mentioned, I'm part of Cornell University. I'm in the School of Operations Research. I'm going to talk today a bit about the course that I taught this past semester called Data Science for All and how we used Vocareum within it. So Data Science for All at Cornell is cross-listed between 3 different departments: the Computer Science Department, the Operations Research Department, and the Statistical Sciences Department. Before I get started, I wanted to say just a few words about myself. I've been at Cornell since 2004, so for 16 years, with a joint appointment between the Operations Research Department and another department called Information Science, which is separate from the Computer Science Department at Cornell. Before that, I worked for IBM Research for 9 years. 5.5 of those were at the T.J. Watson Research Center in Yorktown Heights, New York. Another 3.5 years as a manager in the CS department at IBM Almaden in San Jose, California. My research interests are in discrete and combinatorial optimization, in CS theory and algorithms. I wanted to bring that up partly because I'm not sort of a natural candidate to be teaching a data science class. Why did I end up teaching this class? Because the person who was supposed to teach it left for another university, and I told my chair that I would be happy to cover the course. I find that teaching classes in areas I don't know about are a great way to learn the material, and that's certainly the case for this class, which is an excellent class. I can say that with no hint of being immodest because the class was designed by some other people. So in particular, this class that we're teaching at Cornell is an import of the Berkeley Data8 class called the Foundations of Data Science. The class was designed by these 2 professors, Ani Adhikari and John De Niro at Berkeley, and it's a wonderful class. They did an excellent job. They've been teaching it at Berkeley since the fall of 2015. Right now, they're starting to run versions every fall, spring, and summer. I'm told the enrollments are very large. I heard figures around 1,000 students enrolling in the class, although I don't know what the current enrollments are. One of the other wonderful things about the class, other than the fact that they designed it so well, is that they've made most of the materials for this freely available. So they have an online textbook. They have assignments that they created from 2 runs of the class. They have videos from 1 run of their class, all available on YouTube with pointers to it from their website, which is called data8.org. And furthermore, if you're interested in teaching the class, they have a pointer on the website for how you can ask for all of their lecture slides. They do extensive demos in their lectures and have a number of assignments, as I just mentioned. All of these use the Python programming language within Jupyter notebooks. They created a Python package, Data Science, just for the course. What data science allows you to do is to easily manipulate data in tables, and to visualize that data, as we'll talk about in just a second. Okay, I was talking about Data8, I think. And so here we are. The Cornell site, so I was talking about the Python package Data Science that gets used. They developed it just for this course. I realize that Pandas is the standard data science package, but they make this, this package particularly easy to use, and that's important, as we'll discuss in just a second. If you're interested in seeing what we did at Cornell, the Cornell site is cornell-dsfa for datascienceforall.org. So what are the goals of the course? The goal of the course is to introduce data science for students who haven't had any programming or statistics background. So in particular, we tell students on the very first day that if you've taken a programming course and a stats course, you should go somewhere else. This class is not for you. This is particularly for people who are just beginning programming, have not seen it before, and have not seen stats before. So a very common remark that we heard was that this is the first college level STEM course I've taken, or the only one I plan to take. Cornell has a number of different colleges inside of the university. Most of our students come from the College of Arts and Sciences, and they're in majors like English or Spanish or government or so on. We also get people from the business school, the hotel school, which isn't listed here for some reason, the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, the College of Industrial and Labor Relations, with the fewest overall students coming from the engineering college. One of the reasons that we get students is that the Arts and Sciences College has a requirement for math and qualitative reasoning, which this class meets. And there's going to be a data science requirement starting next fall, which this class will also satisfy. So the class splits roughly into 3 different parts. The first part is a very basic introduction to Python with a particular focus on manipulating these tables and data in tables. So reading in data from CSV files, being able to select particular rows you're interested or columns, doing groups and joins if you're familiar with databases, and in particular being able to visualize them in things like scatter plots and histograms and bar charts and so on. Then we use the fact that we've taught students Python and how to manipulate data to introduce them to probability and statistics. So things like estimating parameters or hypothesis testing, where they get to simulate various runs of drawing sample means and showing what the distribution of that looks like. Then we can introduce them to correlation coefficients and to a very simple regression. Finally, at the end, we talk a little bit about machine learning. So we talk about classifying things using nearest neighbors. So the Data8 folks designed this class to have 3 different types of assignments, which we kept when we taught the class as well. Again, all of these assignments are in Jupyter notebooks. There are weekly lab sections where the TAs lead students to work through particular assignments, and students get to work in pairs or small groups. Over on the right-hand side here, I have an example of a lab, which probably is a little too small to see, where students estimate the age of the universe by using linear regression. Then the class has weekly homeworks where students work on homeworks reinforcing concepts from the lectures on their own. And then finally, there are 3 longer assignments that are 2-week-long homework assignments where students can work in pairs. These are called projects. The first project was on global population and poverty. The second one was looking at the effect of death penalty on murder rates within the United States. And then the final project was on classifying movies into either action movies or romance movies based on their script. So the Data8 people set this up to draw on a number of different data sets. It's quite wide and varied. So the very first lecture looks at using data from the texts of novels, looking at the mentions of characters, and say the number of periods to infer interesting things from books. We look at movies and actors. We look at US Census data. We end up looking at trip data from New York City bike sharing program. We look at whether you can infer whether somebody has chronic kidney disease based on their characteristics and a bunch of other things. In fact, there's many more data sets that I didn't have room to all list on this slide. So we started using Vocarium at Cornell in 2018. All of the assignments and the lecture demos that we have are hosted on Vocarium. Students are able to use the website for the first 2 or 3 weeks while they're trying to decide whether they're taking the course, and from then on pay a nominal fee for using the site for the rest of the term. So the fee is much less than it would cost them to buy a standard textbook, for instance. The initial port of the Data8 assignments into Vocareum was done by the 2018 Cornell instructors, who I've shown on the right-hand side here, Professor Madeline Udell, who's part of the Operations Research Department, and Professor Michael Clarkson, who's part of the Computer Science Department. I think a large part of the work I've done importing was done by Professor Clarkson, so I'd like to express special appreciation for him. One of the things that they did is that they imported the ability to provide student feedback on answers to questions, especially for the labs. So is this answer that the student is providing of the correct type? Is it a number or a string, whatever it's supposed to be? And also to provide feedback in the case students are making common errors. Is this number look like they made a particular type of mistake? It also provided the ability to auto-grade certain questions so that when students submitted their homeworks, for instance, a number of standard questions could then be completely graded automatically. So why is Vocarium a good choice for us? The first thing you need to do is remember our target audience, right? We're trying to aim this class at people who don't necessarily have any computing background whatsoever. We assume that they can use a web browser, but we don't really want to assume much more. We don't want to create barriers to entry to this class at all, if at all possible. So that means that students don't have to install their own setup of Python and Jupyter on their own machine. If they're a government or a Spanish or an English major, they don't have to be worried about whether they can install these things properly. And furthermore, because when you have new users installing packages like this, there are inevitably some installation issues, and we didn't have to allocate staff to try to manage these issues. The grading capabilities in this in Vocarium are very easy to use. We had a number of questions that our TAs had to grade manually because we asked for free-form answers. The auto grading is also easy to use once you've set it up. Once the checks are in place and the Vocarium is properly configured, auto grading is, like it says, automatic. Some particular features of Vocarium that we used, as was mentioned by Sanjay, there's integration with course management systems. So we use the integration with Canvas, which gets used here at Cornell. That meant in particular that once TAs had finished grading, all the grades were pushed automatically back into the Canvas grading book. And also we could post assignments on Canvas and have students link into them from Canvas instead of having to go to Vocarium separately. We use the ability to grant bonus points for students who submitted early. It was possible to also set penalties for late submissions, although I didn't do that in this run of the class. One of the nice features that was also mentioned by Sanjay, I think, is that students can submit as many times as they want. You have the ability to allow that to happen. And you can also have the ability to let them see what the auto grader is giving them question by question. So students could submit their answers for the homework, see that, for instance, they got questions 3 and 5 wrong according to the auto grader, then decide to go back and try and figure out what was wrong and fix it and submit again and see whether they got things right. Vocarium allowed a budget of slip days for late submissions. So for instance, we could tell students that they could submit up to 2 days late by using 2 slip days, and they had an overall budget for the semester. I found this useful in terms of not having to manage excuses for turning in submissions late. Furthermore, there was the ability to set student-specific submission deadlines. So for instance, if there was some particular reason a student needed to turn things in late, which became especially relevant as we got into the second half of the semester this past spring, one could go to the student and automatically extend their deadline or even tell them they could turn things in anytime they wanted to. That was especially useful. I had some community members who were taking the class, not just students on campus. And for them, I just said, submit things whenever you want to. As at all universities this past semester, things were kind of different. So in mid-March, Cornell told all its students to go home and that we would restart all our classes online 3 weeks later. Here's where Vocarium provided a particular advantage in teaching. We didn't need to change a single thing about what we did about distributing, collecting, or grading assignments. Students were all used to doing things through Vocarium. We didn't need to change at all what we were doing. So that brings me to the end of what I wanted to say. I'm happy to entertain questions. I haven't been able to see the chat while I'm talking, so maybe there's some questions out there already. If you're interested in knowing more about the class, you can go to the Berkeley website, which again is data8.org, or you can come to the Cornell website, which is cornell-dsfa.org. If you want to ask me a question in particular, but want to ask it later or offline, you can send me email at davidpwilliamson@cornell.edu.